All right, and welcome back to the College Hockey South podcast. I am now joined by the College Hockey South Commissioner, Kyle Knell. Kyle, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. So we got a lot going on these next few weeks here in College Hockey South with the playoffs coming up. We're going to be doing a little bit of a deep dive into each weekend's kind of upcoming scenarios that we're going to be looking at here over the next couple of weeks, and kind of looking back on the season across College Hockey South so far, and kind of looking ahead to the future as well. But before we kind of dive into that, I was going to try and get into a little bit like of your background for people that might not know, who have followed College Hockey South, might want to get to know their commissioner a little bit more. So can you just tell us a little bit about kind of your background and kind of how you became the College Hockey South commissioner?
Yeah, of course. I grew up playing hockey. My parents were kind of involved with the ECHL Augusta Lynx out of Augusta, Georgia, growing up. I didn't quite start playing until I was probably, I think it was the third grade. But it was one of these, when I started playing, it kind of stuck and grew, fell in love with it, and ended up traveling all over. Ended up moving to Nashville for hockey, and after being in Nashville for a little bit, I ended up going to school at Tennessee. Played 4 years on the Tennessee team, and I got to make met a lot of different people while in my time there, and I got to make got to know Sarge, who's the commissioner. He's the D1 AAU commissioner right now, and obviously former commissioner of this conference. And I had reached out and just said, hey, if there's anything I can help with, 2 years ago. And in the background, I was kind of helping with the media. I was helping with graphics and stuff like that, and
Sure.
kind of segued in more into like a hockey ops, just kind of helping at tournaments. And in the off season, we had a meeting to discuss a few things, and some things occurred, and the current commissioner at the time, not Sarge, but the current commissioner at the time, stepped down, and the board, nominated me, or appointed me, I'll put it that way, to be commissioner. And I've been in this role for the past 2 years, 2 seasons. A lot has happened, and I joke my term's technically up after this season. So depending on everything that we've been doing, if the teams like it, we'll see what
Sure.
happens at our annual meeting, if I
Gotcha.
get reelected.
Yeah, and I was gonna mention, like you mentioned, there's been a ton of growth like over the last 2 years, especially this year, adding in a new Division 1, adding in a women's division. Obviously, those are some big things going on. Like, what do you think? Like, you have been most proud of, like this season and like during your time as like College Hockey South commissioner?
Yeah, it's awesome. Obviously being able to add a Division 1, I think it really lets us separate teams from a competitive balance. And not to say that there aren't D2 teams that should be there as well. This is the first year, and I, envision that more and more teams are going to move into that D1 role, or D1 spot, from a caliber standpoint. We're getting to the point where schools and teams are getting 100+ kids at tryouts, because the kids have been playing hockey all their life that have been up north. And not to say they're burned out, but we have large universities in our conference, and they want to come down and enjoy the college life and still be able to play very competitive hockey. And it's allowed us to kind of create a D1, a D2, a D3, and of course now a women's division. And it's something that when we're doing tournaments like the Columbus Classic at the beginning of the year, which was our first, it kind of kicked off our women's division, where you've got young girls who are coming up and traveling from all over just to be able to watch and see it, and just say, hey, this is really groundbreaking, and we can't wait to be able to do this. And you're changing the game by having something that hasn't been a thing here, at least in the South. And so I'm very optimistic. Again, whether it's me in this role or someone else in the future, that the hockey in this conference, hockey down in the South is just going to continue to grow and flourish. And I'm super proud of that.
Yeah. So we're gonna be diving in a minute to the women's playoffs this weekend. But obviously, like that was one of the huge things this year. Like, why was the timing right this year to kind of take the next step with the women's game? Like a lot of the women's groups, like on a lot of the universities and stuff, were like playing like sort of informally and stuff. And like, what made like now the right time to kind of make it like an official, sanctioned league within College Hockey South?
Yeah, I think the timing was perfect. There were obviously you've got Tampa, USF, Miami are playing in Florida Women's Hockey League,
Mhm.
and they were playing, and I was approached by the presidents of those teams, and of course by um, Georgia and Auburn, and as well as South Carolina, and there's even Tennessee's thinking about creating a team. Obviously, we voted in Alabama and Georgia Southern. Um, but they'd approached. It was October, of the prior year, of 22, and they said, hey, our men's programs are already in the conference. We want to start a women's conference. So it was kind of rapid. We kind of just talked through what the structure would look like, and we want to take baby steps with it, make sure we're doing things right before we just say we're going all out. I'm very proud of where we are right now with those teams
Mhm.
and the structure we have in place. And of course, we have more teams who are interested. We have teams outside the conference that are trying to create women's teams, which is super exciting, that say they
Mhm.
want to be part of it too. And so, um, it certainly helped by having that kind of presence already, at least with a little bit more established teams in Florida, to say, hey, we want to be able to do this. And we made the announcement back in January of last year. And I thought timing wise, it was perfect because when students are trying to determine where they're going to go to school, they're filling out their financial aid
Mhm.
in January, beginning of the year. And so we made that announcement on purpose then, so that way it gave these girls somewhere to actually apply to and want to continue to play hockey.
Mhm. Yeah, like I was gonna say, like one of the crazy things about the women's division this year is like you mentioned, so many like programs have been like established and playing together for years, and like you've also got some programs like to fill out a roster. They've even got some girls who are playing for the first time and stuff. Getting that first experience. Like it's been pretty crazy to see like how these teams are kind of coming together, and you got all these different like experiences coming together. It's been pretty fun to watch. And so this upcoming weekend, Friday through Sunday, we've got the women's playoffs going on in Clarksville, Tennessee, along with the men's Division One playoffs. We're going to dive into the women's division first. All six teams are going to be competing for the first ever women's College Hockey South tournament. And so we've got Tampa and Georgia leading the way as the top two seeds, getting buys going into the second round, and we've got South Carolina and Miami, USF, and Auburn also as well competing. With the winners of those four teams competing to play Tampa and Georgia in the semifinals. So, like, what's your kind of take on how things are kind of shaping up for this first ever women's playoff here in College Hockey South?
Yeah, we when we made the announcement, of course, at the time, Georgia and South Carolina were still kind of waiting to hear officially if they were going to be approved by their schools, and they ended up being approved. In South Carolina, because they didn't kind of have the prior fall semester, like Georgia was kind of already scrimmaging with Auburn at the time, and so they were getting their numbers up, and so South Carolina wasn't sure they were going to be able to get to the point where they are right now and be able to
Mm-hmm.
participate in playoffs. And so, they played a few games and surprised a few, or at least, had some great results. They haven't lost this year.
Mm-hmm.
Neither is Tampa. And right now, as the seeds kind of, you know, play out and where they are, you could potentially see South Carolina and Tampa play each other in a championship game, should they, of course, win all their games. But no, it's good. A 6-team tournament, you got to have kind of a play-in game, right? Or at least you
Right.
got the quarterfinals at first, 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5, and winners will play Tampa and Georgia. The lowest seed is going to play Tampa, so
Gotcha.
that could potentially be the only team that won't play Tampa on that Saturday if they win is South
Hmm.
Carolina. So
Gotcha. Yeah. So reseeding after the first two quarterfinal matchups.
yep.
Gotcha. And then so also this weekend is, like I mentioned before, the men's Division I playoffs as well. They are playing the two semifinals on Friday with the championship and third place game on Saturday. With the matchups being Tampa as the one seed again in Division I. They're taking on Alabama in their matchup, and South Carolina and Georgia are also playing the 2 and 3 seeds, with the winners facing off in the championship on Saturday. Of course, have to mention all these games streaming on the College Hockey South YouTube channel. So if you're not in Clarksville, you can check all the games out there. 14 tournament. How do you think things are kind of shaping up for the first ever as well for the Division I men's playoffs? I really think like things could kind of go either way. I feel like these teams have kind of kind of been pretty level with each other so far for the most part of the season.
Yep. So you've got that those Friday night matchups. You got Tampa versus Alabama. Or I say Friday afternoon, the first matchup, 3 p.m.
Right.
Central Time. Alabama's done something that no team has ever done to Tampa, and that was not only beat them in the regular season. Granted, yes, Tampa went up north and lost to Niagara and then also to Buffalo, but at the beginning of the season,
Mm-hmm.
Tampa had lost at home in 4 seasons.
Yep.
They hadn't lost in the regular season in 3 seasons. And for Tampa to go down, or I'm sorry, for Alabama to go down there and do what they did, I think it kind of opened the eyes. They went 1-2, or at least Alabama went 1-2 on the weekend. But they kind of showed everyone that Tampa is vulnerable, and I
Mm-hmm.
think they with plenty of preparation and planning, I think it's um, that game is going to be very interesting. And of course, the South Carolina Georgia rivalry, I'll just put it that way, because those games are always very physical, they're very close. And frankly, I think at least with the first round, it's a toss up on who's gonna kind of move to that championship game on Saturday. I could expect a couple overtime games, which is great. That's the entertainment. That's the hockey that we want to see. We don't want to see blowouts. So
Right.
you never know.
Yeah, no, you mentioned blowouts. Like you mentioned, like Tampa, like previously in past years, whenever these teams were all in Division II, like Tampa kind of find themselves like in so many lopsided games. I think they were trying to want to get to sort of like the next level to like broaden like the competition and everything. And I think the Division I this year has definitely kind of delivered that. With seeing them lose like some conference games like to Alabama, like you mentioned. So that was obviously a big thing for that. And speaking of Alabama, one thing I also wanted to mention is we see like the graphics rolling out each week of like with the conference standings and everything. We see like the little My Hockey rankings notation at the bottom. I wanted to see if you can give us a little bit of insight on how My Hockey rankings work. I know like the talking point like this week was Alabama or Auburn, who was going to get into that last spot in the Division I playoffs after Auburn ended up winning both games against Alabama over the weekend. Those teams ended up being pretty close record wise. And recently you saw Auburn win 2 games in a row. Give us a little look into like how like the My Hockey rankings kind of shake out and like how that sort of goes into the rankings and everything.
Yeah, of course. At the beginning of this season, when we were kind of planning out, structure for our Division One, with or the division within our conference, you know, because when we made the announcement, most schedules are already written. The teams weren't all playing one another. So trying to have some common ground or point system when not everybody's playing one another, is kind of hard to say, hey, this team should be in over this team. And so when chatting through with the teams, we decided to go with My Hockey rankings. And My Hockey rankings is what AAU uses
Right.
to, you know, quantify who is the top team versus who's the bottom team. And with My Hockey rankings, it takes into consideration, not just your strength of schedule, so how the teams that you played are doing throughout the year, your goal differential, And of course, you know, this past weekend, of course, between Alabama and Auburn,
Mhm.
you know, when you're walking into the weekend and there is a point or so differential from a ranking between the two, it's really difficult to overcome. It's not impossible. And so, you know, again, it was one of these. Auburn knew they had to win both games. We just weren't entirely sure by how much they needed to win. Obviously, they won by 5 combined between the two games, and you know, you can see that at least from the difference in point ranking that they did make up quite a bit of ground. And they're relatively close. It just unfortunately wasn't enough based on again the overall resume. If you look at common games, yes, you know the prior weekend, um, Auburn beats Georgia, and then they lose to Georgia. Um, but I will say that I think one of the big pieces that kind of helped maintain um, Alabama being over Auburn throughout the year was that win,
Mhm.
Alabama's win over
Yeah, it's a
Tampa
big
at the
one.
beginning of the year. It was huge, and you know, with Tampa to be able to maintain the number one seed for at least the past few weeks, and they've been number one before, it really helps bolster that strength of schedule from from Alabama's perspective. And of course, when Auburn played Tampa, the results were pretty significant. You know, goal differential wise. So that getting those results, and then obviously the other, you know, Alabama winning against them. Again, it's all about what the common opponent, what they're doing, and how it all shakes out. But again, my hockey rankings looks at the um, entire body of work outside of just a single
Right.
weekend, and so there was still that chance. And obviously, built some excitement into the weekend. It was just a little short.
Yeah, I had to ask about it because whenever like the bracket was released today, like I saw some of the comments like saying, "Well, Auburn just beat Alabama twice over the weekend." And it was like, well, like obviously there's a lot more that kind of goes into it, but
Yeah.
like I wanted to mention too, like just because Auburn didn't qualify for the conference playoffs, I believe you can confirm if I'm right on this that everyone from Division
Yeah,
One
all
ends up going to
16.
nationals anyway.
All 16, yeah. So it's like I said, we had even thrown out the idea at the beginning of the year to potentially do a 4 versus 5 kind of play in game. But
Hmm.
you know, financially for a team to make a trip to only play one game,
Yeah, sure.
it just doesn't quite make sense, especially if you're planning to go to nationals, you know, a few weeks later. So beginning of the year, again, teams decided we're gonna do my hockey rankings, which you know, again, has flaws to it, but that was the one common ground that we could have because not every team is playing one another.
Mhm.
And we decided just to take the top 4 teams, just again from a financial standpoint. But next year, um, there is you know, every team does have to play one another within the conference. So we will be moving to a point system. So it'll be one of these where you play each other twice. If you play more than twice against one another, we'll take the first home game and first away game, just like we do in all of our other divisions, just so that way we're truly looking at points within the conference as opposed to relying on a national ranking. But yes,
Gotcha.
that is why we've had that disclaimer, at least that little
Yeah.
statement at the bottom of every one of our graphics throughout the year for D1.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, it was a tough break for Auburn. Like winning 2 games was extremely impressive this past weekend. But it's not the end of the road for them. Of course, they're going to be able to compete in nationals later on in March. So, just because they got left out, it doesn't mean it's the end of the road. So, yeah. So that's kind of what we were looking at for Division One coming up this weekend with games going on Friday and Saturday. And then looking ahead as well to the Division Two playoffs coming up the following weekend, February 16th through the 18th. Those are going to be in Huntsville, Alabama. We still have a few spots kind of up in the air. What's kind of left to be determined here over the kind of last weekend here of the regular season in Division Two?
Yeah, division again, we're it's very stressful.
Yeah,
It's definitely something where, you know, if you're a fan, it's kind of hard to plan because you know we're butting up against the last weekend. So um, you know, it's super close, just like D1 was. Um, and I'll say when we get to talking about D3, D3 is the same
yeah,
way. Um, for D2 right now there's 2 spots left.
Mhm.
Um, we take from our Division 2, we take the top 4 teams in the North Division and the top 4 teams in the South Division. Those 4 teams, or those 4 in each, will then come together in Huntsville, and play one another for the championship trophy. Um, we have 2 spots left in the North, and there's a lot of scenarios that could happen. UAH, or Alabama Huntsville, is
Right.
currently sitting at 12 points. Clemson is at 11, and MTSU is at 9. If people aren't paying super close attention to it, they'd probably say, "Oh, MTSU's out of it." They're not, and they control their own destiny here. And the great thing about this is Clemson and MTSU play one another this weekend.
There you
And
go.
so from a scenario base, or from a scenario standpoint, um, even with UAH has to get 1 point. They play Georgia
Mhm.
Tech. Georgia Tech has, I feel in the spring semester turned around. They've got a solid goalie who
Mhm.
stopping 50, 60 shots a game,
Yes.
keeping his team into it, and has done a great job. And of course, they stole a game against South Carolina, which was amazing. So it's not going to be an easy feat. The record doesn't truly show what Georgia Tech's been able to do this spring semester. So it's not an easy game. It's not an easy point. But if UAH gets a point this weekend, they will clinch because they own the tiebreaker. It's head-to-head matchup against MTSU if MTSU were to get 13 points. So they just need 1 point. Now, where it gets even more interesting is the MTSU Clemson series. If MTSU wins both games, even if they win in overtime and Clemson gets 2 points and Clemson's at 13 points and MTSU's at 13 points, we look at head to head as the first tiebreaker. And because there are 2 wins in regulation, or I'm sorry, two actual wins, whether it's overtime or in
Right.
regulation
Right.
for
Mhm.
MTSU would advance. Now, of course, if UAH doesn't pick up any points this weekend, they stay at 12, and Clemson and MTSU both go to OT, and MTSU wins both of those games. They're both at 13. UAH is out, so that's where the 1 point is very crucial for UAH. Now, all to make this super simple, if Clemson wins Friday night or wins one game at all, it's over. And UAH clinches and Clemson clinches. So there's a lot of scenarios here on who's going to fill those last 2 spots. So it's one of these. It's interesting because we have a big weekend planned in Clarksville, having the women's
Yeah.
conference championship and D1 conference championship, but also you have these
A lot
other
else to
games that are
follow.
going on. And same thing for D3. There's some interesting matchups this weekend there too.
Yeah, yeah, you mentioned like some of the scenarios in D2 shaping up for the playoffs. I just wanted to confirm something that we kind of were talking about in the group chat. We were mentioning that there's the North Division and the South Division, 4 teams from both. The overall seating for the tournament,
Yeah.
it doesn't go along with the divisions, right?
Correct. Yep. Same thing. So when we had the conversation last year with the teams, just trying one of the biggest things for our conference tournaments, we want to reward the teams that are doing well. We want to have the top caliber teams and reward them for the how well they've been doing in the season. And so what we're doing for seeding for Division 2 is we are then stack ranking based on my hockey rankings. So that's why we've been posting every other week, at least come spring, or at least this semester, every other week. Our my hockey rankings is. It's unfortunate right now. Obviously, Vandy is the number 2 seed in the North, um, but there is the chance that they end up the number 7 or 8 seed, depending on how things transpire. So I do think that that's something we'll end up changing next year as well. Maybe a 1 versus 4, like kind of crossover, like one plays 4, one in the North plays 4 in the South, just to kind of mix it up a little bit. But
Mhm.
um, we'll see what the teams want to do in um, at the annual meeting, and kind of maybe mix that up a little bit to make it a little more simpler. But yeah, right now, even though again we still have these two spots remaining, um, it's right now the one seed is FAU, number two seed's Florida, number three is Tennessee. So we'll see how the rest shakes out after this weekend.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be interesting following everything. You obviously mentioned that the Division 1 and women's tournaments are going on this weekend, and following like what's going on around the league is it's gonna be a crazy weekend. And we've got the Division 3 playoffs coming up as well, February 23rd through 25th, down in Lakeland. Yeah, like what do you have any other scenarios kind of playing out with Division 3? I know we got some other programs who are seeing kind of just seeing in the Division 3 that we're not seeing like in other divisions. I know Kennesaw State's kind of up at the top right now. What's kind of going on in the Division 3 right now?
Yeah, D3. First off, the where we're going for the tournament will be Lakeland, Florida, the Lakeland
Mhm.
Ice Arena. Beautiful arena. Used to be a bowling alley. They've completely kind of kept with the theme. They reused the lanes for, on the walls, on the tables that people sit at, within the rink. It's a really cool setup, memorabilia all over the place. It's a great environment, and so we're super happy to be able to go back there this year. We went there last year, but yeah, even more interesting situations, right? Kennesaw State, Miami, both having tremendous years. Florida Southern, of course, tremendous year as well. Tennessee, Alabama. Those last three spots could come down to five different teams, which is crazy. Again, just because for D3, we're using the win percentage within Division 3, the CHS games. So, Georgia has three games left. If they win all three, they're going to be at 500. They will move up. So there's a lot of, some teams have one game left, some teams have two. The one team above them loses both games, it could really change the shape of the seeding. So it's only time will tell, and I think we will have a very clear picture, obviously not just for D2, but for D3 after this weekend. So very, very busy weekend ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's gonna be a marathon these last few weeks heading into playoffs. So, like we mentioned, we got the Division 2, February 16 through 18 in Huntsville, and the Division 3, February 23rd to the 25th in Lakeland. You can catch all games across all the tournaments on the College Hockey South YouTube channel. So we're looking forward to the playoffs this weekend and the next couple weekends, as we're gonna have some playoff packed weekends. One other thing I wanted to talk about. Is the Best in Flow tournament. We've seen like a lot of the voting, a lot of the fun graphics, and everyone's having a good time with it. Can you tell us a little bit about like the origin of like kind of where that idea started and like what the kind of the response has been to that so far?
Yeah, so it's one of these that from an origin standpoint, for those that follow the Minnesota high school hockey state tournament, they do. I think it started on YouTube, but there was a YouTube personality does a like an all hair team,
Mhm.
and so you always thought that was interesting. We had someone, we had um, someone with Maha Mid South Amateur Hockey Association, which Memphis area, Memphis, Tennessee, kind of reach out and wanted to see what we could do to kind of drum up some excitement and do something a little bit different that no one's really done before. And so, with partnership with them and Stick Flow Hockey, we kind of put together this tournament. And there's decent money on the line for the winning teams, and so I expect obviously this not just this week, but next week. Next week being the finals, to see a lot of push. There's a lot of push by MTSU right now and Tennessee, and from the men's side, and of course the women's those that are left in that bracket are also pushing. And again, it's just something to drum up some excitement and have some fun on social media. And again, at the end of the day, it's really just about kind of sharing the name, spreading the word that we exist, and hockey's thriving down here in a different way. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things turn out. I kind of
Yeah.
take a peek here and there at the results just to see who's leading the way, and
Mhm.
it's going to be close.
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun. I've had a great time like seeing all the winners and everything, and the money is going to go a long way for whoever ends up on the other side of it. So for those of you who don't know, you can vote for the best in flow. We're down to the semifinals right now at collegehockeysouth.com/best in flow, just FLO. And so the winners will be announced on February 18th. So you'll make sure to stay tuned for that. It's been a lot of fun following that this year. And so that's been a great thing that's been going on this year. So that was all I had for you right now. Kyle, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we get ready for playoffs here this weekend?
No, I of course just want to say thank you. Appreciate all the things that you've been doing with this. Again, a lot of exciting things coming, not just for playoffs, for of course this best in flow tournament. Again, we have a few exciting things coming down the line as well. Obviously, we've got nationals. We've got our SEC tournament that we're bringing back for our 8 SEC teams at the end of the year. That'll be after nationals, and before long, we'll be making the announcement for our all-star team that's going to participate in the All-Star Challenge in April 12th through 14th. So we're going to be sending an all-star team comprised of members from our Division I, Division II, and Division III, divisions to represent us in a conference, an all-star team. So super excited about that. But yeah, just want to thank you for everything you do and look forward to the next weeks that you put together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we got a lot of stuff coming down the pipe here in the next couple of weeks in College Hockey South. So we'll make sure to keep it all locked right here. So Kyle, thanks so much for joining us here tonight, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you got it.